Hi, it's not your fault or mine, but together I'm convinced you and I can do something about it. We have a great show for you today. Stay tuned. Voices of humanity, we need to hear your voices. We need to hear your voices. Hi, welcome to Voices of Humanity. I am your host, Sandra McKechnie. Voices of Humanity at prconnectionsradio.com, the voice of new media. And like we open, it really is not about fault. It's about us collaborating together and doing something about it. Shout out to Local Street. Shout out to Jelly Social. I am your host, Sandra McKechnie, and I am privileged. I'll use that word. It's Black History Month. I hope you're enjoying yourself. I don't do the month thing. I think it's 365 days a year. And that's why we do this show. But definitely keep the month. That's great. I think it's wonderful. Today, we have a special guest for you. I'm going to bring her on in a second. I am actually a cultural sensitivity and awareness certified life coach, and I would love you to get in touch with me. I do, yes, cultural sensitivity work, double consciousness work, and a lot of equity work as well, anti-bias, anti-oppression. And I would really like to hear from you. It's a huge topic, this is. And I also coach in the area of, I coach women that have had diverse challenges in their life and want to leverage that, put it all together to live their best life. And this podcast is what I do. I also do cultural sensitivity and awareness trainings called double consciousness, two B's. All right. So I'm going to bring on Marty now. Welcome, Marty Lampkin. Come on down.
Hello.
Hi, sweet. I've been trying to get her here.
Sandra.
Okay. I've been trying to get her to the show for some time. I can't even believe she's here. In fact, today I thought I wasn't hearing from you. I was like, Lord of mercy. Don't tell me I got to cancel.
Oh,
this
I
show.
was coming. I just had to get some work done, but I
Oh,
definitely
that's
was going to
okay.
be here.
She's busy. That's why. Let me read some of this bio. Okay. All right, here we go. Marty Lampkin is a professor in the School of Social and Community Services. She has been teaching in the social service work program since 2018 and joined the team as a full-time professor in 2021. Proud of you, girl. Marty obtained a BSW from Ryerson University and MSW degree from the University of Toronto. She has worked in the social service sector for several years, supporting individuals and families living with developmental disabilities, intellectual disabilities, and autism spectrum disorder. Over the years, she has provided intensive case management services, complex support coordination, system navigation, individual and family counseling, as well as educational capacity building and trainings. Marty Lampkin is a compassionate and dedicated counselor, clinical social worker, professor, and social justice advocate who grounds her practice in anti-oppression, anti-colonial, and decolonizing methods. She understands that interlocking systems of oppression ingrained in society contribute to the personal life challenges that children, youth, and adults experience. As a counselor, she works to explore these intersections through a holistic perspective that helps clients recognize their strength and resilience and reach their personal goals. We're going to get into this. This girl is on it. She's in it to win it. Where did we meet? At one of my learnings, right?
Yes, double consciousness was the first time I met you.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew we had to stay in contact with one another.
We did. I'm so glad we did.
Yes,
you were such an encourager about those trainings, and it really encouraged me. And you had a hand to do with me doing it at another agency, and you sure did. So thank you. Thank you. In case I didn't thank you. But it's wonderful for you to be here. This topic is close to both of our hearts. I've been in the developmental sector and such for years. Marty too, and she's gone on. She is a professor. Okay. So we're very proud of her. And we welcome this month to celebrate Black History Month in this. As I said, I do the 365 days a year thing. But if we're going to have a month, let's use it up.
1000%.
Right? Marty, I want to first off the bat say to people, I want to know a little bit about you before we get into all the good stuff and your passion, why you are passionate and why you are here to unfold some of this for us. Who is Marty Lampkin?
Okay, so thank you for that wonderful introduction. My preferred pronouns are she and her. And so, as you've said, yes, my name is Marty Lampkin. I've kind of been a bit of an advocate, social justice advocate, I think, all my life, which led me into this field. In terms of my passion, again, a lot of my experience is mainly working with the marginalized community of folks living with disabilities or other abilities. And just recognizing how neglected they are from our society, how isolated, how stigmatized they are in our societies, in our communities, and how their caregivers and anybody attached to them also frequently experience that marginalization and that silencing. So it's been a huge passion of mine to bring awareness to that particular area, because actually at this point in time, when we look at current stats, about 6.4 million Canadians live with some form of disability. 6.4 million, okay? And when we think about this worldwide, we're looking at 15% who identifies with having some form of a disability. So it's quite a common phenomenon experience in our world. However, individuals who do identify with having any form of disability, again, they experience a lot of marginalization. And especially if those disabilities are what are referred to as kind of invisible. So we might not see that person with the cane, or we might not see that person in the wheelchair. And so we don't necessarily recognize that perhaps, you know, they need additional supports, right? And so in terms of my specialization, again, that's been working with adults, particularly with intellectual or development disabilities, and then also those who are on the spectrum, because autism is a spectrum, and no two folks with autism are going to be the exact same or look the exact same or need the exact same supports. And so within that, I've worked with the individuals directly who some of them were survivors of institutions. And those institutions existed in the Americas. They also existed right here in our backyard in Canada, where it was this idea that we have to separate these people from the community and institutionalize them.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And some of those institutions, again, survivors have come out, they have advocated, they have spoke about the harms, the physical, the emotional abuse that they've experienced in those settings, wherein a lot of parents thought they were giving their kids the best opportunity, which was to be cared for. And actually the quite opposite happened. On the other spectrum of my work, when I work with families who still have their adult children in their home, they experience a lot of isolation, a lot of stigma. Sometimes there's cultural shame, depending on their cultural identities. Having a child or with a disability actually is something that could bring shame among the family. And so therefore they become isolated from their supports, from their connections. And it really has a severe impact on their mental health and well-being. And it's just not as simple, you know, for some parents to just go out to the movies, you know, with their children or something. If you have a child with other needs, there are other supports, accommodations that are required. So very kind of common day ways that we engage in our communities. We go out, we watch a movie, we go for dinner, right? These actually become huge barriers, or there's additional challenges for these families to be able to engage in those ways. And so that's really been a huge, I guess, learning that I've had the privilege to journey with a lot of these families with and on, and to support them through that. A lot of it was through connecting to services, but also through a lot of counseling as well, because of some of those concerns. So as a Black racialized woman of African Caribbean descent,
right,
my passion is that intersection now of kind of Black cultural identity, anti-Black racism.
Marty, baby, sorry, babe. Can you take off the because you are lagging because of the fogginess in the back.
Oh yes, of course.
Thanks, sweetie. I know. I don't like people see my background either, but I don't care. I think that's what's happening.
1 second. Let me adjust that for you.
No problem.
How's this look?
Yay, that's nice.
Better?
Yes, let's
Okay.
leave that. Let's see if that helps there.
Let
Wonderful.
me know
Okay,
if
so
that
you said
works.
6.4 million. In what demographic?
In terms of in Canadians live with
Yeah.
identifying as having a disability. This is according to Easter Seals. Easter Seals is an
Wow.
agency in
Yeah,
Toronto as well, right? That
that's a
provides these
lot.
services. So it's
Wow.
quite larger than just the way I think our mass media communicates these ideas that they're just one off here and there, people who need some sort of special accommodations to fit in to
Right,
the
right.
standard of the world, right? So again, there's that need to try to adjust who you are as opposed to accepting and recognizing that this diversity exists, right?
The cultural shame
Just
part
generally.
is huge. The cultural shame part is huge. You're talking about um, most of the planet, the whole world's turning brown. But I mean, people that have had a lot of shame in an intergenerational, multi-generational way,
1000%.
right?
1000%.
And then showing up, we used to, you'd be hiding things like that. I have a
Oh,
great, it was a
1000%.
right? A second uncle, great uncle. Well, he was kind of hidden away. Like you don't talk to people about going in. We used to call it like mental institutions, and so such as it was
Yes.
called,
Yes.
right? So we didn't put any pretty names on that, and there was certainly a lack of dignity today. You wouldn't get away with that, right? In terms of respect. But in your work, when you're thinking of cultural shame, how does that show up for people of color? Like, how does it
Oh,
really?
in so many ways, right?
Wow.
So the masking is huge where and what I mean by masking is that you
Yeah.
pretend that the issue doesn't exist, right? So
Mm,
sometimes I might have worked with parents or communities who they just can't understand why their child is like this. They just can't
right.
understand why they can't just do X, Y, and Z. Well, actually, they have an intellectual disability. So although their age is at a 40-year-old, their capacity actually, in
Right.
terms of understanding instructions, following through with instructions, etc., it's quite more complex than what meets the eye because often they don't have a physical disability, right? It's one of those invisible disabilities. And so there's sometimes a lot of frustration with the parents who can't really understand that. And when you think about the intergenerational piece of, well, did I see my parents talk about this? Did I see my great grandparents talk to their, like, right? You don't see those
Yes.
conversations being
Yes.
held. So it makes
Yes.
sense when I work with families. I very much normalize that. I can understand why you feel frustrated. I can understand why you don't get these things, but have you ever considered this? And oftentimes that was not a subject of discussion, right? And perhaps
Mm,
the community, the culture, the country that they were kind of raised in, right? And so it's
hmm.
a huge learning curve. It's a huge learning curve for parents to have to
Wow.
understand and recognize that, and then also come to terms with that. Because if you already had the perception that your child is going to be like this, and then that there's a bit of a grief and loss there also that doesn't really get picked up either, right? And so there's often a lot of support in place to help families in helping their children, but who's actually helping
Wow.
the family,
Wow. Wow.
right?
When I think of when I look at young men that may have an intellectual disability, but they present as perhaps they don't, and walking around with the judicial system the way there is, Lord have mercy. I think to myself, they're in danger, physical, psychological, you
Everything.
know. And by the time they open their mouth, maybe you can tell. I mean, like this is diverse. It's not that people with intellectual disabilities show up a certain way and you can just tell. You look, they don't have a
Exactly.
cane, like you said. And so I think to myself, how in terms of the judicial system, do you know anything about that? Like how people show up there?
Yeah, well, what happens often if there are racialized communities, right?
Yeah.
And I'm just going to speak to my experience specifically working with those of the African Caribbean diaspora and other racialized communities, but mainly those of the African Caribbean diaspora. They are seen as Black men and women before they are seen as also having that autism spectrum disorder. And so what happens is that their Blackness is a target, as it is for all Black folk. Our Blackness is the target because of those associations through enslavement of Blackness with criminal and Blackness with dangerous.
Absolutely.
Right? Where
and even back in the day, Marty, even back in the day, I'm interrupting you. That makes a good show. But even back in the day, Marty, they would look at our young boys. They never had an opportunity to be boys. They were putting our boys out in slavery. The young boys were looked at as men and treated as such.
1,000%. And wow.
Wow.
We still see that today, where our Black children somehow go from like toddler to
yes, our girls
adulthood.
As well. Yes, absolutely.
And the girls as well, of course, right? And then if we talk about folks who are queer or non-binary, then the marginalization is even worse. But right, so I've worked with a lot of adults who are in the court system. The lawyers are speaking to them. They can't comprehend. On a good day, nobody can really comprehend what a lawyer is saying, anyways. But can you then imagine the layer of that? They're asked to sign documents that often they aren't informed fully about. So I've done a lot of work with lawyers to help them understand that what you're saying that you think is so clear in your mind, you're actually going right over this person's head, and you're not going to be dealing with the ramifications of that. This individual is going to be dealing with the ramifications of that. And so I think that's where, and a lot of folks aren't aware of how many folks living with some sort of intellectual disability or autism are in the judicial system. They are.
So you've actually had to communicate with lawyers in terms of advocacy for
1,000%.
people.
Yeah, 1,000%. And just working with the clients to say, do you understand why we're here? Do you even understand what a court proceeding is?
Right.
Who is explaining this? Right. Who was breaking this down for folks? Okay, so there's a lot of education and learning that needs to be done. And again, there isn't much support for that, because any resources for kind of folks interacting with the judicial system, they often don't have the understanding of the autism piece. They often don't have the understanding of the intellectual disability piece. So they might be very versed, and they often are, in court proceedings and, you know, all the laws and the procedures and the practices. But then, so this is another piece of a lot of the work that I've done, is that when I am connecting families or individuals to resources, you know, they might have a resource for this particular thing, but as soon as they find out the person has autism, it's kind of like, oh, well, we can't support that person. We don't know how to, right? And so these folks often fall through the gap of services. And for me, it's less of what you can't do. It's more of how are you going to build capacity to be able to support. And that's where those conversations need to start happening, because even in the disability sector, specifically in Ontario, which is where I've worked primarily, the sectors are very siloed, right? They're very, right? So we have the disability sector over here. We have mental health sector here. We have the justice sector here. We have the housing, right? We have housing support over here. And that doesn't mean there aren't some really great programs that are doing some of that cross work. But again, it is still very much siloed. And so it's quite hard for parents, caregivers, and the individuals themselves to receive the support that they need throughout the lifespan. Throughout the lifespan. Because again, resources are targeted sometimes for particular parts of the lifespan. So you'll have a lot of maybe supports for infants and children when they're in school and things like that. But once they graduate, what happens to those kinds of supports when they become seniors and elders? What kind of additional supports are there for them as well, right? So you're thinking about this across the lifespan, and then also thinking about it in terms of the parents across the lifespan. Because if mom and dad die, who's then going to provide supports for the adult? What's going to happen?
So so when you're looking at this, do you see a lot of bias in terms of all of these intersections for service? I mean, do you see, is there this sort of implicit or implied?
Especially if they're of the African Caribbean descent, right? So a lot of people are now awakened to things that our ancestors and folks like you have been stomping and chatting about forever, which is anti-Black racism. Okay, this has existed for a very long time.
Yeah.
However, folks are kind of becoming a bit more aware of how prevalent and pervasive it is. And so I've even had experiences where parents are advocating for their children, and instead of being seen as strong advocates, they're being seen as very challenging parents. They're very
Okay.
aggressive
They
parents.
better not be too strong, because you know what they're going to say.
Right?
Right? But
Yeah.
they have, but that it's something that, well, a parent's not going to not do it. That's for dang sure.
But then some parents do actually then have that anxiety or that fear of actually advocating or
Okay,
speaking up,
because
right?
they're not going to get the services. They're not going to get the
They're not going to get the stigma services, or they get more stigmatized from the place that they're told go and seek these services from, or these services are not delivered in a culturally appropriate or culturally sensitive way. They're not rooted in Afrocentric perspectives. They're not rooted in our an understanding of anti-Black racism. It's not uncommon that a lot of these sectors are filled with primarily white Eurocentric modalities, and so they really also just don't speak to our truth and our reality. And a lot of clinical staff aren't trained. They're just not trained on anti-Black racism. They're not trained on Indigenous ways of knowing. They're not really trained on how all these things intersect. So, you know, if a colleague is giving a great recommendation, but then I'm saying, do you understand that Black folks get paid a lot less? We work more precarious part-time jobs. So actually, that mom going to that yoga class that costs $60 or $70 might seem very feasible for you, but for this mom, she's going to have to choose between, right, covering that rent bill, which keeps increasing, or doing that yoga class. So it's actually not a culturally responsive suggestion or approach, which is why mom wouldn't go, right, and wouldn't partake in something like that, because there's a lot of barriers in the way to her accessing that when you're thinking about self-care, you know, and these kinds of ideas that are promoted, that are very much rooted in a lot of capitalism, because you have to have some dollars to be able to do a lot of these things, right?
I was thinking just now how much of this has to do with this our multi-generational stuff, and in terms of when whiteness would look at us and say, you know what, they don't feel, and this is what was happening. They don't feel. They're monkeys, they're apes. They're not human. Look at their heads. Let's measure their heads according to some pseudoscientists like Carl von Linnaeus, Johann Blumenbach, and Darwin and his cousin there and all. And, you know, the way that we were seen is you. So what I would love to be, and I've got, you know, I love white people in here. Okay. My grandfather, he's Scottish, and you know what I mean? I'm not, I'm just saying it's come with us through the time warp. So it's not something that we can deny. It's not about, oh, how could you say that? It's what it is. I brought bias with me. I was assimilated into whiteness. So I understand a little bit of it. And so when we're looking at each other, we're thinking of our Black boys a certain way, and our Black men and our family unit, and how that was, you know, was ripped apart and dismembered. And we have a challenge because it did come with us. So we show up in the 21st century, and we do need advocates. There's certain people that will coach with me that will not go to white people. You know, that's just the way it is. Because clearly I should have a little bit of more of an understanding of because of the work I do and the work Marty's doing as well. So it's not about, people will say, well, look, you're not going to a white coach and you're Black, you're racist. That has nothing to do with it. In fact, that's nonsensical, but because has nothing to do with that. People go to their people. You have white people have white doctors and white clinicians, and, you know, so people go to who their people are. That's okay. We don't have to unpack that. But my concern is how Black boys have always been seen, Black girls, and how that shows how our bias, if we're talking about multi-generational, intergenerational, anti-bias work, you know, equity work, all of this work, double consciousness, two streams of thought, two social identities. The fundamental is that we're not aware of our own awareness, right? And, you know, I mean, we're taught to self-hate as well. I mean, so Massa would give that whip, you know, to a brother and say, no, beat them like me. You need to do that. You need to beat them like me. You need to kill them if you have to like me. You are me, but at the end of the day, no, you're not me. You're refuse. You're nothing. So we bring a lot through the time warp. And those, the
1000%.
assimilators, all of that is affecting our children today. So we need advocates like this woman right here and I said, hey, I saw a video of yours on LinkedIn. He was like, what are you doing? Girl, they were lying down on the street. What was going on?
Oh, I attended a protest, in regards to no more deaths from folks who are homeless. And so that was around the pervasiveness of people dying, because our shelters, at least here in the GTA, have been at full capacity for years. This is not a new phenomenon. This has been occurring. And so it was just a way for me to show solidarity to that, because again, I have worked with folks on the spectrum who have also experienced homelessness, who have also been in shelters. And again, the shelter workers, the shelter supports aren't always aware of the autism piece. And so again, it's a double marginalization, or when we think of our identities, we're not just one identity, right? So when you think about that intersection, so I mean, I've been in shelters, I've supported people, I've advocated with housing so that folks don't lose their housing, in different scenarios, like different past examples of folks I've worked with. So again, I think the piece that you wonderfully raised around the intergenerational, right, parts, it's very prominent on a general basis. Know that Black mental health is
come back to us, Marty. You're freezing a little bit, but shake yourself. Oh, I hope we don't lose you. Marty's frozen. Come on back. I want to talk to you about the bias piece among people with intellectual disabilities. Marty, come back. I think is she frozen? I think so. It's a great topic, though. Maybe she'll come back to us. Dana, you want to put a commercial in? Marty. Hi there, I'm Sandra McKechnie from Double Consciousness. Double Consciousness looks like this: cultural sensitivity, cultural awareness trainings. I've been doing it for 4 years. We're going into our 5th year, or 41st time on Zoom, and we're doing it. Would love you to join us. The next thing that I do is I'm a certified life coach holding space for clients in the areas of cultural awareness and sensitivity, right? So people that may have a challenge and they just want some space, a consultation, coaching opportunity to unpack implicit racial bias. Everybody's welcome, and we would love to have you in the trainings or book a consultation. And we have a free opportunity, 15 minutes if you want to have a chat and get to know me and find out where you fit in that. The next thing that I do is I am a host for Voices of Humanity out of prconnectionsradio.com. If you want to be on my podcast and you're a fit, because it does have to fit with the show, has to complement the show and the network, I would love you to get in touch with me. And I'm also, from my heart, and I've always been a singer-songwriter, and I love this stuff. I love the singing. We put it in our trainings, our cultural sensitivity and awareness trainings. So sometimes I just sing just like this. You're all that I want. You are all that I need. And you brought me here when I can't find my way. You're all that I need. And you brought me here to pray. You should hear that with my keyboard player. It's to live for. Thank you so much for your time. I hope that helps you to know who Sandra McKechnie is. Take care. Bye for now. She's back. Okay, everybody, subscribe. Okay, Voices of Humanity at preconnectionsradio.com, the voice of new media. Welcome back, Marty.
Thank you.
I know she did it on purpose. She just wanted to make another entrance. All right.
How did you know?
Listen, that whole bias piece in terms of, I mean, inadvertently, you're going to be doing anti-bias work in this all over the place, right? So what does that look like amongst people with, depending on, I guess it's diverse, but the intellectual disability? Do you find bias within that whole sector, that whole community of people?
It's hard to generalize in that sense. I think
Uh-huh.
that in terms of just working amongst kind of clinical staff and clinicians, many of them conduct assessments in a particular way that has no Afrocentric lens,
Mm-hmm.
no kind of any of those perspectives to it. So it's very much kind of assessing what the family has, doesn't have, what they need. But if you're not connecting that to anti-Black racism, to capitalism, to poverty, to
Yeah.
sexism, to all
Yeah.
those isms, right? And so a
Mm.
lot of times those assessments, they don't hold spaces for that. They don't ask you questions about that. They don't really value that. And the other piece that stood out to me before the commercial break was when you talked about, you know, uh, the anti-Blackness and the enslavement and how that's been forced down. It made me think about an actual a worker. This happened in the States back in 2016. Charles Kingsley, who worked with adults with autism, and this particular adult was nonverbal as well,
Mm.
and actually was stopped by the police because, again, he's quite a tall, big Black man supporting his client. And there's photos of him literally laying on the ground with his hands up saying, don't shoot, I'm the worker. Like, I'm the worker for this individual.
Hello. That's incredible.
And I believe he still got shot. I do believe he still got shot in that
Heck, it's
scenario.
not that
So,
incredible. It happens all the time.
right? So
Yeah.
even as staff, even as a worker, I still have to deal with anti-Black racism among my colleagues, among physicians, psychiatrists, doctors. I still have people question my skills, my abilities, right? So again, it's so pervasive. It affects the families, but it also affects us who are here to
Mm.
advocate and work with the families. So you're kind of fighting for these voices to be heard, but you're also fighting amongst these
Mhm.
systems
Mm.
that are in place. Because again, back to your point around Black life being like cattle, Black life not being valued, Black life and Black concern not
Mm.
mattering.
Oh my
So when
gosh. Hello. I sure enough know, girl. You know, and I was thinking of the health inequities, the inequities in the healthcare system. There's a gentleman by the name
mm,
of, and audience, if you want to look this up, it's important that you get some resources too. Dr. David R. Williams, he's out of Harvard, and he's got some amazing videos out there, and his literature. He's done the stats, and just the healthcare inequities are incredible. How people get treated, certain groups, our indigenous brothers and sisters, Blacks, Koreans are also treated a certain way, or Asians. It's incredible. But of course, Blacks
yeah,
are still classified into races at the bottom of that rung, right? So we got the foot is a little heavier on our necks.
1000%.
So that's
Yeah, and I'm reading a book right now by David Archer around anti-racist psychotherapy, and one of the pieces that
David
he
Archer.
highlights is the fact that you know, yes, not everybody's racist, but everybody does benefit from anti-Black racism,
Ooh,
right?
interesting.
So
Mm.
everybody benefits from our subordination. Everybody benefits, and this also likewise for indigenous, folks as well, when we're settling on their lands and they've been really stripped away from all their resources in terms of our advancement. So, it comes down to that understanding that although I may not necessarily engage in these particular acts, you still benefit
Oh,
from
I love this
anti-Black
stuff.
racism.
Absolutely. I
You
love it.
come
This is a
1000%, right?
this brings awareness and action, because people will say, what can I do? I wasn't there. I hear you. But the challenge is this. I always say to people, if you can get a Black author, now dare I say that, if you can go to a Black restaurant, okay, you might not like the spicy Caribbean food. I don't know, order a salad. Just some from fried plantain. That's nice, but we do benefit. So even the books that people are out here, I can name some people, but I won't, that might not be nice, out here benefiting and selling their books to Black people, have these huge Black audiences because people are like, oh, they understand. The whiteness gets it. And I'm not trying to be facetious. It's just when you go to people with handle and support people in areas of arbitration, and you see, oh my gosh, this thing has come with whiteness through the time warp. It's right here in the 21st century, you know?
Yes.
And people are benefiting, you know, and that's a challenge.
1,000%. A huge challenge. And I just posted on my social media a post just at the beginning of Black History Month, because I just have to sit and reflect on this, that, you know, from February 1st to February 28th, my voice is seen as such a knowledge holder, right? It's so much wisdom.
Your voice? I missed
and
that.
then when March 1st comes to be, my voice is seen as such a knowledge holder and
Wonderful.
full of wisdom. And
Wonderful.
then when March 1st comes to the end of the year, my voice is now a problem, right?
Ooh.
My voice is now a nuisance.
That is so telling. Who wants to hear you the rest of the time? All this all this internalized guilt. And you don't have to be guilty. We can do something about it. And when people say that, oh no, I agree, I totally agree, my gosh, this is terrible. But that's nice, but we desire the awareness in action, you know.
1,000%.
That's something.
Yeah.
What are we doing about it? And I have to do that in my own life every day. A bunch of us that have been assimilated into whiteness, and you know, one time it's easier to be white. Who wants to be Black? It's very inconvenient sometimes. So but we're proud of it. We've got some powerful people that we can celebrate
1,000%.
at this time. On some
1,000%.
huge shoulders, some educated giants that has taught us so much. So needless to say, I'm extremely proud of you, girl. You're doing the work. You are doing the work.
That. But it's people like you, right, that make the work possible. Like, right? Because I think another part of the work that's not seen is everybody wants to commend you for the work, but they don't recognize how much labor this takes. They don't recognize how much emotional labor it takes to constantly advocate on behalf of other people, and also experience those forms of violence yourself, right? Experience being stopped in stores, experience being followed, experience having loved ones being shot and killed by the police, experience, you know, child welfare involvement. Like, they don't recognize that also is taxing on you as well. And again, it speaks to the mental health components too, right? So I think that it's also people like you that remind me, you know, there are people before me who have been fighting this fight for me to do what I do. And I hope that I'm also paving the way so that when my time comes and goes, there will be people after me that can come and pick up where I've left off, because this work is not easy at all. And I think because of the anti-Blackness, we are perceived as, we can just tolerate whatever.
Oh my!
We can't get angry. Yeah. We can't be upset about it. We should just tolerate every day seeing our people die and killed. This should just be normal for us, and we should carry on going to work and carry on.
Yes, because
going about our day-to-day reality.
We're shucking and jiving, and that's not to offend anybody. The reality is, if you have been in this system 50 years, 100 years, if you've had ancestors, they have passed things on to you inadvertently. They didn't sit there and think about it. It was in them, so they passed it. They taught you. They taught us. Our parents taught us things. So it's almost like, you know, you're looking at us a certain way. And if the pseudoscientists said, well, they can't feel. No, they you know, and their women they deserve to be raped. And because look at their buttocks, you know, they obviously deserve to be raped. So if you come to my training, I know I'm simplifying this terribly, but get in on those trainings. Marty, are you doing like webinars or anything?
Yes.
Big stuff to know about.
Not webinars at the moment. I do work in partnership with a counseling kind of practice. So specifically, we focus on the mental health of the BIPOC community, which is Black, Indigenous, people of colors. Within that BIPOC community, I specialize specifically those with intellectual disabilities, developmental disabilities, because again, most folks are not trained or have any education on how to provide counseling services. And really, there's an assumption that you got autism, there's no way you could experience any other mental health concern. There's no way you could experience anxiety. There's no way you could experience depression. There's no way you could experience grief and loss, right? So there aren't a lot of supports out there and available to address the mental health concerns for folks on the spectrum. And so that's kind of a special area of my work. Outside of that, in terms of my community work that I've developed, I developed actually a program specifically for Black adults with autism or other intellectual disabilities to actually teach them about anti-Black racism. And actually teach them,
so
you know, if you got stopped by the police, why is that, right? What can you do? What things can you show? Can you tell them so that they understand you also have autism? And so it was such a beautiful community-led group where I brought people together who, again, they were treated bad, but they didn't understand why.
Oh, this is wonderful. Yeah.
They didn't understand why, because nobody had conversations to teach them about the fact that anti-Black racism exists, right? And some of them had workers that had treated them really bad, and they didn't understand why either. And so that's a program that we'll be launching again in the spring. And those are the ways that I just try to pour back into that.
You know, because when people have the knowledge,
right,
then you don't, there's ways that you don't show up for yourself. Never mind the people. When you have the knowledge and you understand, oh, that's why they're doing that. Doesn't make it right, but at least you know what you're dealing with. And that knowledge can give you some freedom. And then you take, this is why I do the show. Take the burden off yourself. It's not your fault. Oh no. You know, nothing's wrong with you. Something happened to you. So you accept that and you move on. And with wonderful people like Marty,
forward.
Yeah. Now I'm so curious. I would love to do this. I know I would really love you to return and like, are there individuals with intellectual disabilities that you think would be great for the show?
Oh yeah, there's people that come to mind that I think, again, I also want to preface that I do this work as somebody who is not living on that spectrum or having an intellectual disability or any form of disability in the way it's been defined in our society.
That's good to know, because a lot of people are doing this work and they do have intellectual.
So I also I'm also very mindful of the privilege that I have to even hold these spaces and have these conversations. And my intention is never to take that away from people in the community. And so again, when I brought that group together, it was really a space to say, hey, this is this thing called slavery. This is what enslavement did. This is what, right? But then we also talked about our Black cultural identity and our belonging and why it's powerful and what we loved about ourselves. And they shared stories with one another. And some of them still were connected to this day, but there definitely are folks that I think of. One particularly is a mother. She identifies as having exceptionalities, is how she identifies herself. She's also an author of a book. I will just grab that for you really quickly off my bookshelf. She created this book called Exceptionally You.
Oh, really?
It's an animation child book that I wanted to support.
Nice.
And so, you know, but a part of her story, again, is experiencing so many barriers as a Black woman, and then so many barriers as a woman with exceptionalities. And so I think that she, if she's interested, could be a really great addition to speaking really to her truth.
I think it would be amazing. I think that if we had a little panel, bring on 3 people or whatever StreamYard can hold, that we could, would you be interested in something like that? Or would they be interested in something like that? Perhaps
we might have to just check in and
yeah, well, we're going to have a sidebar conversation. Yeah. But just so that people can really get it from them, you know?
1,000%. 1,000%.
Good stuff.
And again, I encourage people to start looking at, right, disability authors, educators. There's so much podcasts. There's so many things out on YouTube, right, where people who actually live those realities are sharing and speaking about what that's like. I don't have to stop and think or ever call, for example, a restaurant, is this accessible to me, right? There are certain things that I don't have to consider in my day-to-day life. Again, so I only speak from a place of the privilege I've had to work with families and how they've invited me into their lives to be a part of their journeys, right? And really just trying to advocate around that intersection there, because again.
And if somebody said to you, Marty, if somebody said, well, why are you so focused on the Black people with disabilities and it's just all people, what would you say? All people with disabilities.
Yes, all people with disabilities, but because of intersectionality, We have to look at things a bit differently. We have to understand that all people with disabilities do not experience the world in the exact same way. And that when you add on the racism piece, it's another layer. I've also worked with folks who are on the spectrum who identify as being queer. When you add that on, it's another layer, right? So it's not as easy as just saying focus on everybody. Yes, I do think all folks with disabilities experience ableism for sure, but our intersectionality impacts us all a little bit differently. And so for me specifically, I pay attention to that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I think that's fantastic. Thank you. You're a doll. And I'm going to talk to you about getting back on the show with a couple of people at least. I think, well, I just think it would bring a lot of awareness to, you know, I've looked it up and I'm going, oh my goodness, this is so important, because people are assuming some things that maybe they've been taught and they don't realize, they're unaware. You know, they're unaware of their unawareness, and it's okay. I was too. Hello.
1000%.
No, I'm growing and I'm learning. And so I want people like Marty on the show, and I'd love to get others that can really speak to this in our community, in the Indigenous community as well. That would be wonderful.
1000%. 1000%. Yeah.
Okay, so you're going to give me your handles and stuff so that I can, when I shoot the video out, that I can put them there. Now, are people able to get in touch with you, or
yes, I will.
Yeah. Okay.
1000%. They can send me an email at my email address. That's the best way to get in contact with me.
Okay.
Which is Marty, MARTY.
Okay.
Dot Lampkin, LAMPKIN.
Did you send me your handles already?
I'm not sure if I did. I might have. Okay. I can't remember. I can't recall.
Well, maybe a long time ago when you're supposed to be on the show, but you're going to come back.
Yes. Yeah. Probably a long time ago. Yeah. So yeah, there are folks that can directly reach out to me for education, training, things like that. And then again, you can follow me on my social media platforms where I post quite a lot of critical, reflective points and thoughts and bring awareness to community events or organizations that are doing amazing things. So those are the two best ways.
All right. Thank you, darling. Thank you for coming.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
It was good. We got to work on our lagging on our internet, but yeah, we had some good information, and I want you back. It really is good. Thank you, everybody. Did you want to put in that next? I don't know if Dana wants to go to that station identification again. Thank you, Dana. Dana's doing all the technical stuff back there. Yeah. Voices of humanity. We need to hear your voices. We need to hear your voices. I love that commercial. I love seeing all the people. I got to put you in one of those.
Yeah. Well,
thank you, everybody.
Before we go, I gotta get a quick screenshot of us so I can just. Is that okay with you?
Sure. Oh, definitely.
Because that was great. Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3.
Yay.
Wonderful.
Did you do it? Okay, because all right.
Wonderful.
Thank you, sweetheart. It was good to have you on the show. And we are going to talk about you getting back here. Now, is there anything else you want to leave with our audience? Is there something else you want to leave with our people that they need to know?
No, not really. Just I guess just my contact information if they want to get in touch with me or any shape or form. So I'm going to pop that in the chat here just in case you need it. That's my email. And then in terms of Instagram, it's
yeah, and I'll put it on the post as well. Okay, hon. Wonderful. All right. Sweet. Wonderful. Thank you, guys. See you next time. We'll be back. Bye.